Over the top? No, we had no over the top rules. We were totally reasonable, thoughtful parents who made solid decisions at every turn.
America's good guy was silently breaking inside. For decades, Ron Howard was the embodiment of American wholesomeness. From the freckle-faced Opie Taylor to the brilliant mind behind Apollo 13, he gave the world stories full of hope and warmth. But behind the curtain, Ron's personal story was far from lighthearted. Beneath that signature calm demeanor was a lifetime of pain he never showed, until now. It all began with a loss so devastating that even his brightest film couldn't outshine the grief. In the fall of 2000, while wrapping up production on How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Ron received heartbreaking news. His mother, Jean Spiegel Howard, the emotional compass of his life, had passed away. She wasn't just his parent, she was his muse, his anchor. And her death was like losing the soul of everything he stood for in film. But Ron didn't stop the cameras. He didn't collapse. Instead, he quietly dedicated the film's end credits to her. It was a silent scream through cinema, one only those who knew him could understand. But this was just the beginning of a series of hidden heartbreaks. And years later, the pain would only deepen. Losing his father meant losing his moral north. 17 years after losing his mother, tragedy returned. In November 2017, Ron's father, Rance Howard, passed away at the age of 89. To the world, Rance was a journeyman actor. To Ron, he was the foundation, a mentor who didn't just raise a son but built a storyteller. Rance had appeared in most of Ron's films, sometimes in small roles, but always bringing something no actor could fake: truth. Ron called him the embodiment of human decency. Whether as a preacher in A Beautiful Mind or a background mechanic in Apollo 13, Rance's quiet strength grounded every story. His passing wasn't just another obituary in Hollywood. It was the end of an era for a family that had given everything to film and asked for nothing in return. And yet, even as he mourned, Ron kept filming Solo, a Star Wars story. Another movie wrapped, another chapter closed. But his heart was never the same. And to understand this pain, we have to go back to when it all began. Before the spotlight, there was only hunger and hope. Ron Howard didn't grow up surrounded by red carpets or designer suits. Born in 1954, he entered a household fueled by ambition but suffocated by poverty. His parents, both actors, made a vow: Ron wouldn't act professionally until he turned 5. That single promise nearly destroyed them. They turned down job offers for Ron even as their bank account dried up. There were days when the fridge was empty, weeks when rent was a fantasy. Still, they stayed true to their word. By the time Ron turned 5, he finally took his first paid role in the journey. The paycheck helped cover old debts, but what should have been a celebration came with emotional wounds. On set, Ron's red hair made him a target for cruel jokes. Freckle-faced freak, they called him. His father nearly got fired defending him. This was Ron's first taste of fame, bitter, bruising, and unforgettable. And yet, even as the world mocked him, the world was about to fall in love with him. The boy from Mayberry grew up too fast. In 1960, at just 6 years old, Ron Howard became Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. The role transformed his life and America's living rooms. Viewers saw a sweet child with sparkling innocence. What they didn't see was a kid memorizing entire scripts, hitting marks under searing lights, and missing out on a normal childhood. While other kids played after school, Ron rehearsed. Every smile on screen came with 1,000 retakes. By age 14, Ron had appeared in 243 out of 249 episodes. He earned $1,000 per episode, enough to support the family. But at what cost? He wasn't just growing up in front of the camera. He was growing up without space to be a kid. Behind the loving scenes with Andy Griffith was a lonely teenager carrying the weight of a nation's expectations. Every mistake, every awkward phase, every heartbreak captured on film forever. But when the cameras stopped, so did the phone calls. From icon to invisible, Hollywood shut its doors. When The Andy Griffith Show ended in 1968, Ron was only 14. But in Hollywood's eyes, he was already a has-been. Typecast as the innocent Opie, casting agents didn't see potential, they saw nostalgia. Over the next 2 years, Ron went on over 50 auditions. Each one ended the same way. You're too recognizable. The golden boy of Mayberry couldn't get arrested in Hollywood, not even for a background role. Even when he landed jobs like Gentle Ben or The Smith Family, the pay was low and the critics were cruel. From making $1,000 an episode to scraping by with $500, Ron felt the sting of rejection. It wasn't about the money, it was about identity. Was he just a character, a relic of black and white TV? The world had loved him. Now it had moved on, and Ron began to wonder if maybe he should too. But as one version of himself faded, another began to emerge. Reinvention born from grief. What the world didn't know was that Ron had been silently preparing for a transformation. Tired of being seen as a washed-up child star, he pivoted not with rage but with quiet fire. He started learning everything behind the camera: writing, producing, directing. Every painful experience, every rejection, became fuel for a new vision. He began crafting stories that mirrored the very struggles he'd endured. When he directed Apollo 13, Cinderella Man, A Beautiful Mind, and Hillbilly Elegy, it wasn't just about entertainment. These were deeply personal films about resilience, loss, brilliance, and redemption. Traits his parents had lived, themes that haunted him. In every frame, you could feel his mother's empathy. In every arc, his father's integrity. And even when the awards came, the Oscars, the Emmys, the applause, Ron remained the same quiet soul, still hearing the voices of Gene and Rance guiding him from the shadows. Because the truth is, some legends aren't made on camera, they're forged in silence. The legacy he built while quietly healing. Ron Howard never asked to be a celebrity. He never craved the spotlight or chased headlines. What he wanted and quietly achieved was something much harder: to create art that made people feel something real. Behind the success, behind the Oscars and box office hits, there's a man who built his legacy while grieving in silence, battling doubts, and refusing to let pain define him. He could have given up after Hollywood turned its back on him. He could have resented the industry that once adored and then ignored him. But instead, he chose resilience. He chose reinvention. Every setback became a stepping stone. Every personal loss became a creative spark. In a town built on ego, Ron stayed grounded. In a business that forgets, he built a name that lasts. His story is not just about movies. It's about quiet strength, invisible wounds, and a voice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. Today, when you watch a Ron Howard film, you're not just seeing good storytelling. You're witnessing decades of heartbreak transformed into hope. You're seeing the shadow of a mother who taught him empathy, the guidance of a father who showed him discipline, and the spirit of a boy who once stood in Mayberry, unsure if he'd ever matter again. Ron Howard's legacy isn't just in what he created. It's in what he overcame to create it.